The galaxy was vast, filled with stars and worlds cataloged with a kind of reverence that bordered on worship. Every civilization that joined the Galactic Council brought its own traditions of naming, yet all agreed on one thing: no world was ever left unnamed. The archives of the Council stretched back tens of thousands of years. An endless library of planets recorded in the Lingua Galactica with precision and elegance. Velori Nye, jewel of the spiral arm, was known for its sapphire seas. Aurelia Prime, cradle of scholars, gleamed with glass spires and libraries the size of mountains. Serenthal, a world of song, was etched into history as the place where three great empires signed the accord. Each name carried weight, history, pride, and then came Sol 3, a planet whose people called it Earth. When humanity entered the galactic stage, their first encounters with other species were tentative but full of optimism. Humans expected curiosity, perhaps awe at their resilience and adaptability. What they did not expect was laughter. The Council's scholars had translated the human word Earth into Lingua Galactica with ease. Its meaning, however, drew snickers. To other species, the word didn't carry poetry. It was not home, foundation, or mother. It translated into the simplest of terms, dirt, so it was entered into the archives. Not as Earth, not as Terra, Sul, or any of the names humans had long used for their cradle, but as dirt, catalogued Sector 7G. At first, humans thought it a mistake. Surely no grand council, no assembly of wise and ancient civilizations would reduce a world teeming with life and history into something so plain. Yet the designation remained, repeated at every formal session. The representatives of other races found it amusing. "The dirt dwellers," some said with a chuckle. They rose from mud and stone, and how fitting their planet reflects it. Others used it more casually, as if it were not an insult, but simply an accepted fact. Assign the human delegation to Dirt Sector. It stung more than humanity admitted. The word Earth had carried deep meaning for millennia. To humans, it was not just soil underfoot, but the concept of home itself. When a soldier went to war, they swore to protect the Earth. When a poet wrote of longing, they dreamed of returning to the Earth. Farmers tilled it. Parents buried loved ones in it. Explorers left it behind, but never forgot it. Earth was not merely dirt, it was identity. But in the echoing chambers of the Council, that identity was stripped away and replaced with a word that sounded cheap, almost mocking. Ambassador Lena Reyes, humanity's first representative, fought tirelessly to correct it. Each time her delegation was introduced as the people of dirt, she would raise her voice, measured but firm. It is Earth, not dirt, Earth, yet her corrections vanished like breath on cold air. The Council saw no reason to change their records. To them, dirt was accurate, even fitting. Humanity was still young, rough around the edges, unrefined compared to the ancient powers who had colonized half the galaxy before humans first lit fire. What the Council failed to see, however, was what Earth had forged within its people. The planet they dismissed as dirt had never been gentle. Its storms were violent, its winters bitter, its deserts merciless. Predators stalked humanity since its infancy, forcing them to adapt or die. Disease and famine shaped their resilience. Earth had tested its children in every way imaginable, and they had endured. When humans left their atmosphere for the first time, they did not glide elegantly into the stars. They clawed their way up, rocket by rocket, with fire and thunder. Their spacecraft were not smooth crescents of crystal or shimmering sails of light. They were brutal, metal coffins that rattled and roared, hurled skyward by sheer determination, the same grit carried into their expansion. Colonies were not graceful utopias, but rugged outposts on barren rock. Where other species sought comfort, humans embraced hardship. Where others waited for ideal conditions, humans made do with whatever scraps a planet gave them. And so the galaxy, still laughing at the name dirt, began to notice something strange. The people who came from that soil were unlike any others. They were survivors, problem solvers, fighters. They were stubborn to a fault. And though they lacked refinement, they possessed something the elegant civilizations often forgot, an unyielding will to push forward no matter the cost. It was ironic, almost poetic. The very insult meant to belittle them became a mirror of their truth. Dirt was not weakness. Dirt was foundation. From dirt rose stone, iron, steel. From dirt grew crops to feed billions. From dirt, humanity built everything. The galaxy still called their world dirt. But the humans who rose from it? They would make the name echo with a new meaning, one forged in the fires of struggle and carried on the shoulders of determination. The archives may have written dirt, but history was about to learn the name Earth. Every council session began the same way. The great amphitheater of alien delegates, thousands of species, each with its own banners, insignias, and heralds, would echo with the roll call of civilizations. Names were read in proud tones, like songs. The Lumari of Serenthal. The Ikari of Velori Nai. The Vaith Dominion of Aurelia Prime. Then, inevitably, the chamber would fall into a ripple of amusement when the herald's voice reached the human's turn. The Terran delegation of dirt, Sector 7G, it was a wound reopened every time. The laughter was subtle at first. Whispers, smirks, a few muffled clicks of mandibles or fluttering of frills, but it grew bolder as the months passed. Some species even turned to openly jeering, and every time Ambassador Lena Reyes would rise with composure carved from steel. "It is Earth," she would correct, her voice clear, deliberate, and calm. Not dirt, Earth, but her correction was ignored, or worse, treated as a quaint insistence. The Council's scribes did not alter the archives. The Council's delegates did not change their language. Humanity remained from dirt. For the ordinary humans scattered across the stars, miners on asteroid belts, engineers on alien stations, cadets in foreign academies, the insult became something they carried daily. A young cadet named Marcus Hale, serving aboard a Valorian patrol cruiser, recalled the moment of introduction to his squad mates. "This is Hale, Dirtborn," the officer said, as if it were an afterthought. The alien recruits chuckled. One muttered, "Careful, he might track soil across the deck." Marcus clenched his fists but said nothing. He could not fight back. Humanity's position was fragile, their place in the council uncertain. To lash out would confirm the stereotype of brutish dirt dwellers. He endured. And so did countless others. At first, humanity felt shame. Soldiers lowered their gaze when the term was used. Colonists muttered resentfully but kept quiet. Parents told their children, "Ignore it. One day they'll respect us." But something strange began to happen with time. The more the galaxy mocked them, the more humanity looked inward to the meaning they had always known. Earth had never been pristine crystal towers or shining seas of alien beauty. Earth was mud under fingernails, calloused hands working stubborn soil, fields planted against all odds. Earth was trenches dug in wars, homes built from stone and timber, graves where loved ones returned to the ground. Dirt was not an insult. Dirt was survival, and so a shift occurred. The very word that had once burned with humiliation began to harden into pride. On colonies at the edges of space, graffiti began to appear, dirt proud. Soldiers on ships started calling themselves Dirtborn before aliens could. A jest stolen was a jest disarmed. Farmers on new worlds reminded their children, all life begins in dirt. Without it, nothing grows. Even on Earth itself, the sentiment spread. Musicians wrote songs titled Dirt and Blood. Writers penned manifestos. If they call us dirt, let them remember dirt is where seeds take root. The insult became a banner. Ambassador Reyes noticed the change. At first, she worried humanity was simply masking pain with bravado. But when she visited colonies and saw the phrase painted proudly on armor, carved into steel walls, even tattooed on arms, she realized something deeper had taken hold. Humanity had turned mockery into defiance. One night, during a council banquet, a Valorian noble sneered as he lifted a crystalline goblet. "Tell me, Ambassador Reyes," he asked, his tone dripping with false politeness, "how does it feel to represent dirt among so many shining stars?" Reyes smiled, not coldly, but with a warmth that disarmed him. "It feels," she said, raising her own glass, "like standing on something solid while the stars drift above with no roots at all." The alien faltered. Laughter rippled, but this time it wasn't at her expense. By claiming the name, humanity had changed its weight. Dirt was no longer humiliation. Dirt was foundation. Dirt was strength. And as the galaxy would soon learn, the foundation of Earth was built to endure storms that crystal towers could never withstand. The galaxy had always believed itself safe. The great empires and coalitions that made up the Council had endured countless local wars, border disputes, and pirate raids, but nothing that threatened the structure of civilization itself. Peace was fragile, yes, but it was peace. That illusion shattered when the Krath swarms came. They emerged from the void beyond mapped space, an endless tide of bioengineered nightmares. Each Krath vessel was not a ship in the traditional sense, but a living organism, a blend of flesh and chitin wrapped around cores of stolen metals. They traveled in numbers so vast that sensors failed to count them. When they descended on worlds, they stripped them bare, not just of resources, but of life itself. Forests vanished, oceans boiled, cities became feeding grounds. The first attack fell on Serenthal. Its crystalline cities and melodic towers had stood for millennia. They fell in 5 days. Survivors spoke of skies dark with wings and oceans that churned with living monsters. Serenthal was erased, and the galaxy felt the first tremor of fear. Aurelia Prime was next. If Serenthal was beauty, Aurelia was strength, the jewel of the Council's military power. Silver dreadnoughts filled its skies, vast fleets bristling with weaponry. They met the Krath in orbit with confidence. That confidence turned to horror when the swarm consumed them. The dreadnoughts were torn apart piece by piece, their crews devoured by boarding beasts that dissolved armor with acid and shredded bulkheads with talons. Aurelia's skies burned for weeks until silence claimed them. The Council panicked. Old rivalries resurfaced. Alliances cracked under the pressure. Some species withdrew entirely, pulling their fleets back to defend their own borders. Others fled, abandoning colonies and trading routes to the swarm. And yet, in the shadow of this catastrophe, the Krath moved closer to Sul, closer to Earth. Most of the Council expected humanity to collapse under the inevitability. After all, what was dirt compared to Serenthal or Aurelia Prime? If the jeweled worlds could not stand, how could this crude, young species hope to hold? But Earth was not Serenthal, and humanity was not Aurelia. Where the great powers panicked, Earth prepared. Factories that had once made automobiles and consumer electronics retooled overnight into forges of war. Orbital shipyards blazed with activity, constructing vessels that were not elegant but practical. Hulking war machines with redundant systems. Armored hulls and weapons that could be repaired with basic tools. Humanity did not aim for beauty. They aimed for endurance. The moon became a fortress. Defense satellites turned Earth's orbit into a minefield of railguns, missile silos, and kinetic projectiles. Civilian hands joined soldiers in the effort. Children hauled scrap metal for the forges. Old engineers emerged from retirement to design new engines and weapons. Every person contributed. Mars, still struggling as a fledgling colony, became the first line of defense. Trenches were dug across its red sands, armored vehicles deployed to patrol the dust, and orbital stations armed with nuclear payloads. If the swarm came, Mars would buy time for Earth to rally. And come, the swarm did. The Krath appeared on the edge of Sol like a living storm. Millions of signatures filled the void. The Council predicted Earth would fall in days, but the humans did not run. Instead, they sent a single message across the galaxy, broadcast in every language. We are the people of Earth. You call our home dirt. Then know this. Dirt is where we stand. Dirt is where we plant our feet and make our last fight. If the swarm wants it, they'll choke on it. When the first Krath wave struck Mars, the colonists detonated nuclear warheads that turned the atmosphere into a blazing inferno. Millions of swarm creatures perished in fire. The survivors fell upon the surface, only to meet lines of tanks and artillery hidden in the dust. The red planet became a killing field. The swarm pressed on toward Earth itself, but they found orbit bristling with defenses. Kinetic slugs the size of buses ripped through living ships. Missiles detonated in storms of fire. When the craft boarded, human Marines met them in brutal close-quarters combat, wielding flamethrowers, shotguns, and blades. It was not elegant. It was not graceful. It was savage, bloody, desperate. And it worked. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. Worlds they had considered unbreakable had fallen in days. Yet the world they mocked as dirt stood unbroken, even as its skies burned and its oceans churned with battle. The war had tested names, and already the name Dirt was beginning to mean something very different. The swarm did not relent. For every craft creature burned to ash or shattered in orbit, another 3 seemed to appear. The galaxy had seen invasions before, but none so unending, so merciless. The craft were not an empire seeking territory. They were hunger given form. Mars had burned, buying Earth time, but the swarm adapted. Their next wave bypassed most orbital defenses by sheer numbers. Living ships plummeted into the atmosphere, breaking apart into thousands of pods that streaked like meteors across the skies of Earth. Cities became battlefields. New York drowned in fire as pods crashed through skyscrapers. Paris awoke to the thunder of claws on cobblestones. In Beijing, the Great Wall once again became a fortification, with machine gun nests and missile launchers dug into its ancient stones. Even rural villages, far from strategic centers, found themselves facing beasts with serrated limbs and slavering jaws. The Council, watching from afar, predicted collapse. Surely humanity would scatter, abandon their home, and seek refuge on distant colonies. It was the pragmatic thing to do. Why cling to dirt when survival meant fleeing it? But the humans did not flee. They dug in. On the plains of Africa, trenches stretched for miles. Farmers left their fields and took up rifles, their hands calloused not just from work, but now from war. In the frozen wastes of Siberia, craft leviathans emerged from pods, only to be lured onto ice sheets rigged with explosives, hundreds of tons of alien flesh vanishing into black waters. In the Amazon, soldiers and civilians alike used the jungle as cover, striking from the shadows with fire and steel before vanishing back into the green. The oceans were no safer for the swarm. Naval fleets lured the massive aquatic craft into traps, detonating depth charges and nuclear torpedoes that turned entire seas into boiling graveyards. Everywhere, humanity fought, not with the precision of an ancient empire, but with the desperation of a people who had no choice. And in their desperation, they revealed a terrifying ingenuity. Improvised weapons became legend. Farmers welded plows into armored blades for vehicles. Engineers jury-rigged power plants into makeshift energy cannons. Civilians in besieged cities filled bottles with gasoline and hurled them into the faces of monsters 3 times their size. And always, their defiance carried words. Messages broadcast on every frequency, translated into every tongue of the Council. We are from Earth. You call it dirt. Good, because dirt buries the dead. Dirt feeds the living. Dirt is where life begins. Come and take it from us, if you can. These words spread like wildfire. At first, they were propaganda for morale. Soon, they became mantras repeated across battlefields, carved into helmets, whispered in foxholes. Even alien worlds, hearing the broadcasts, felt something stir, something dangerously close to hope. The Council could no longer laugh. Their dirt was proving more resilient than their jeweled capitals. Reports came in. Entire craft swarms stalled for weeks in the ruins of cities, unable to advance against human resistance. Earth itself had become a fortress, every street and field turned into a weapon. The Battle of Sao Paulo was the turning point. Millions of craft descended on the city, overwhelming defenses. Yet the humans did not retreat. They detonated the city's power grid in one massive surge, frying thousands of creatures in electrical storms that danced across the skyline. The city was reduced to ash, but it did not fall. Survivors stood amid the rubble, rifles in hand, daring the swarm to return. The galaxy watched in awe. Sarenthal had sung its last note. Aurelia Prime had burned into silence. But Earth, mocked as dirt, roared with life, louder than ever. Ambassador Lena Reyes delivered a broadcast from a bunker beneath London, her face weary but her voice fierce. You call our home dirt. Remember that when you count your dead. Remember that when you speak of resistance. Dirt is unyielding. Dirt is eternal. You may trample it, burn it, scatter it, but from dirt we always rise again. And in that moment, the word was no longer a curse, no longer an insult. It was a vow. The Krath kept coming. Humanity kept fighting. The war was far from over, but one truth had already been written. Earth would not break, and neither would the people of dirt. The war dragged on for years. The Krath swarms kept coming, endless as tides, but little by little their momentum slowed. Where other civilizations had collapsed in days, Earth endured. The swarm had expected to devour a helpless world. Instead, they had found a fortress that bled them dry. Humanity adapted with every wave. The first swarms were met with nuclear fire and orbital guns. The second with brutal ground warfare in every street and forest. By the third and fourth, humanity had learned how to fight them not just defensively, but offensively. Captured Krath corpses were dissected in hidden labs. Weapons were redesigned to exploit their weaknesses. Incendiaries for their soft tissue, sound-based weapons to disrupt their hive communication, specialized armor to resist their corrosive fluids. The war that was supposed to end Earth became a crucible, and from that crucible, humanity emerged sharper than steel. The galaxy could not believe it. Sarenthal had sung its last song. Aurelia Prime had burned in silence. Yet Earth, mocked for its crude name, stood unbroken. More than that, humans had begun pushing the swarm back. Coordinated counterstrikes reclaimed Mars. Lunar fortresses launched raids into the asteroid belt, cutting off Krath staging grounds. For the first time, the swarm knew retreat, and when the end came, it was not sudden. It was slow, grinding, inevitable, just as humanity had always fought. The Krath were not defeated in one grand battle, but in 1,000 small ones. In the ruins of São Paulo, in the frozen trenches of Siberia, in the jungles of the Amazon, in the depths of Pacific waters. Piece by piece, the swarm shattered against the will of a species that refused to yield. When the last hive ship burned in Sol's skies, Earth did not celebrate with grand parades. Too much had been lost. Cities lay in ruins, entire nations scarred. Graves stretched farther than the eye could see. But amid the grief was something stronger than sorrow, vindication. For the first time, the galaxy was forced to see Earth as it truly was. At the victory gathering of the Galactic Council, silence filled the chamber when humanity's turn came in the roll call. There were no smirks now, no whispers of mockery. Every delegate present remembered the broadcasts, the images, the battles where humans held when all others had fallen. They remembered the defiance of dirt. Ambassador Lena Reyes rose from her seat. Her uniform was worn, her face lined with years of war. But her presence carried the weight of every fallen soldier, every grieving parent, every survivor who had stood unbroken. She spoke slowly, each word measured like stone laid on stone. I will say this once more. Its name is Earth, not dirt. Earth. From Earth we held the line. From Earth we broke the swarm. From Earth courage spread across the stars. Remember that name, for it will outlast this war. It will outlast all of us. The chamber remained still for a heartbeat that seemed to last forever. Then, one by one, the scribes amended the archives. The official designation of Sol 3 was changed at last. Earth. It was victory, not just of survival, but of identity. Yet among humans, the story did not end there. On the battered streets of Earth's cities, in the colonies that had risen from the ashes, in the barracks of soldiers who had fought and lived, another truth took hold. They still called themselves dirt-born, not in shame, but in pride. Farmers painted it on barn doors rebuilt after the war. Veterans tattooed it on scarred skin. Children shouted it on playgrounds, daring anyone to challenge them. Dirt was not a slur anymore, it was a legacy. Dirt was where humanity came from. where they had stood, where they had endured. For the galaxy, the war was a story of survival against impossible odds. For humanity, it was proof that even the smallest word, wielded with defiance, could change the course of history. The Krath had been mighty. The Council had been skeptical. The galaxy had been mocking. But in the end, they all remembered. The people of Dirt had shown them what it meant to fight, and Earth, their Earth, would never be forgotten again.